Thought About It podcast, episode 2. Today we're going to take a look at a relatively heavy article, though this is not a heavy podcast, I can promise you that. The Psychology of People Who Are Tired of Existing by George J. Ziogas on medium.com. And yes, I don't even know why I clicked on this, why this is something that I'm reading when this is not the trend of the articles that I tend to read. I, number one, don't tend to like going into psychology just because I think in terms of tangible steps that can be taken, which actually turns out to, like now that I'm saying it, um, plays into this article quite well. Um, I also don't question things down to my existence. So that's essentially the whole point of the article, and really like the every component about that. So it's kind of strange that I'm talking about this, but there are some good points to make and some interesting ways to see these types of articles. That I'm quite lucky that I'm doing this podcast wanting to explain things. It's not like I clicked on this because of that. I actually don't know why I clicked on it, but it was not because I was trying to find something to say about something, or finding something that's trendy or going to make a splash, because there's really a lot of content. But this piece of content has 2.4 thousand claps, 45 comments, and was on the main page of Medium. So it's definitely something that other people are reading as we speak and is relevant to a lot of people, clearly. Or at least it's in discussion. So this article, number one, let me talk about the thing that I learned about myself when reading stuff like this. I used to take a look at heavy articles like this and would consume them like I was looking for how I could relate to the problem. I used to always do that in the past, and I found that that's just um, you know, I don't really know what to say about that. It's just something that I don't do anymore. Later on in this podcast, I might understand why, but all I could say right now is I I just don't see it that way, and I more so see these types of articles like how I differ from some people. That in and itself, though, is not really valuable. Like when you say like that provides me context on my life, I've never really felt personally like that has provided me much. um Context on my life is great, but it doesn't really help me get anything in terms of it just doesn't really help. It's like a good feeling, but I don't even know if I really have a big feeling behind it because it doesn't really provide much. So no, you don't have it the worst, but it can seem like it doesn't provide much value at times. So what this does make me think about, though, is that it helps me define myself. And when I'm defining myself, that is something that's very difficult to do. Now, if I find a piece of content, I know I've got it better than the person who's feeling like they're questioning their existence or they're questioning the meaning of life. That is a low place to be in, and I'll talk about later about the ways that I do relate to the person that they're talking about in the article in a small way. And but defining yourself is can be tough for most people, I think. For me specifically, if you were to ask me what kind of person I am, um I don't have that well-rounded of an answer, and the answer that I do have is quite limited, and I believe I found why by not reading these articles through the lens of me and this person are quite different because me and them have made very different conclusions on this piece of writing. Before I was to talk about a piece of writing, I was leaning towards consuming how I was the same as that person. And I was almost selling myself on how I was the same. That doesn't leave a lot of time for me saying it's completely fine. This is a little strange, but saying, like, that person is just very different. Like, they've got a big problem that they're dealing with that I am not. Um, and more importantly than the problem is some of the conclusions and different routes that they've turned down. Uh, like, I turned left, they turned right on certain ways of seeing things or this making decisions and things like that. Those left and right turns are areas where me and a person really differ, i.e., how, like, who I am. So, like, who would I describe myself as when I'm reading this piece of content? Well, this content is quite interesting in that, number one, it's quite short. It seems like it's really just uh, introducing existential exhaustion. And it's also introducing, like, it's introducing writing to help people that might be doing this, like questioning life or in a very low place, and attempts to connect with them and obviously guide them into a simple reminder, which is at the end, one day at a time. Take one foot in front of the other and slow it down. Now, when you're reading through this article, again, this is written by George J. Ziogas, which is Ziogas on medium.com. And the article is called The Psychology of People Who Are Tired of Existing. And it was published 6 days ago. It's the fourth month of the year, so in 2026. So if you, like, when you're reading through the article, you're gonna notice that um, they're talking about somebody's purpose a lot, and somebody's inability to have found their purpose is something that makes them question their existence. I did not even write that down yet in terms of a summary, but that's actually a fantastic summary. One that I would not be able to produce in school, I could guarantee you that, because I would need to talk it out like this, and that would be quite difficult. And I try to not occupy my mind too much of talking things out like that. But that is a fine summary of this article, is that lack of purpose. Now, it does take a little bit of talking to get to a point that I did write about because it is quite in depth and I don't want to skip over it quickly. Now, that topic had to do with GPA in school. Now, where does this tie together? Um, I'm going to have to talk this out to even find why. But your purpose in life gets really impacted by looking at other people, and this is something that's referenced slightly in the article or directly. I'd have to go back and look at the exact quotes, but the whole purpose of the article is there. So assume it's a paraphrase. Now, looking at what somebody has relative to me. Now, you can all imagine, or you might have experienced that friend, or you might be that friend who has gone through school, has it figured out, knows exactly what they're going to study, goes and gets a job, has been doing that for 20 years, and knows exactly what they do. If you were to ask that person, what do you do? They tell you, I help these people with this problem for this reason, and they need me then. How many people have life figured out that perfectly? By a show of hands, I can guarantee you that the whole world is putting their hands up, because even that friend, you know, I might be thinking that there's something wrong. They could have it figured out like that. But they might be able to think back to when they got started. I'm thinking back on a conversation of who I'm thinking about right now as an example. A great friend of mine, haven't connected in a long time, but she was worried that she was not going to get in to her career. She didn't see the demand in the job. So I know that somebody like that, that I admire for an example like this, has also had trouble knowing their purpose. They might not define it like that because I don't even define it like that, but this article is touching on a problem like that. And the problem that the article is touching on is something that I translated to somebody not knowing what supply that they should be demand, or what I completely flipped those over. Okay, what demand they should be supplying, what people want them to be supplying, and what fulfills them, and what's valuable. And this sounds like a simple question to answer, but when you start framing it in terms of somebody's life purpose and not having that life purpose, and that lack of life purpose leading us to questioning life and feeling drained and exhausted because we feel lazy, and we feel like, this is a point made in the article, that we feel lazy and that we're just sitting around and we don't know what to do and we feel terrible. And we might be looking at friends. I believe that's an example that I have. But you're sitting around and you're taking a look at other people and you're saying they've got it figured out. You know, they have this purpose. They know exactly what to do. Now, the as I'm explaining this, it that makes sense, and that's really just a way of framing purpose and valuable, uh, a positive view on why you should exist in the view of this article. Now, the way that they guided it down is that it essentially saying like one step at a time, pat on the back, completely fine. You know, like I'm kind of feeling bad, even like suggesting something else that somebody can do, because it almost like brings a little tear to my eye that somebody sees the world in like, somebody's having a tough time like that, because like not not having momentum on your feet is actually like really really sad to think about, that somebody's going through that, and somebody doesn't have something where they're going. Like if I think about that guy who's like, just people are wondering like, why is this guy so energetic, and what's getting him going. Like I want people like that, not sitting around questioning. I'm not talking about somebody who's like sitting around up to no good. That's kind of like completely out of this conversation. That person is probably not reading. That person is probably not whatever. That is a issue that I don't know about, so I'm just gonna butt out of that. I'm talking about somebody who seems like they have been really trying, but is is struggling in there, um, and doesn't feel like they have any momentum going. You know, I haven't really thought of that character, and that's why I'm saying it's a little tough to think about actually. Um, because I have felt like a completely useless person for the majority of my younger life. Like I was looking at everybody around me getting good grades. I was hiding my grades on my reports, when like, when you're like grading other people's papers in class and then you give it to them. There's like that's just the most embarrassing part of my day. So like I know what it's like to not have momentum like that ever. But not knowing where you're able to supply a demand in the world is, I can see how that can be labeled as um an existential question for some people. But I'm thinking back of some of the most pivotal times in my life and the things that I did, and going back to school and studying and taking that extremely serious for pure GPA reasons, and wanting to get a better GPA than every person that I ever met, um, was a completely empty goal that was fueled by who knows what, though it was not only anger, and it was probably not only anger, or anything to do with a negative emotion, and more so that I wanted to be a show off. I wanted to be somebody who is amazing and powerful, both because of the monetary gains that I started to learn about when it comes to a GPA, and then also the social reasons. You don't have to agree with those, but just understand that if you have a flawless GPA, you are able to flaunt that. You or you can at least think that. But I can tell you that better than not having that, the result of trying to get that and then hoping that that works out, because I can guarantee you if you have a polished GPA and when you talk about only that number, you are going to sound fantastic in any room. So, and there's no doubting that. Like if you go to the highest room and you talk about that polished GPA, what are they going to say? There's essentially nothing that they can say in the strictest room, and that's the one where you get paid, and that's the one that you get made. So that is what I did. What that caused me to do is blindly follow a number to, and it just completely distracted me. I was not thinking about anything but a number for what, 4 years, and I did not finish yet. And that's a perfect example, is that I left that number to pursue something else, which is actually leaving a country based on understandings that I've gained while studying. I not only gained an understanding of my own country, my personal view, not something that I need to share, but I made a decision that there's better opportunity elsewhere. I also made the decision that I actually haven't made a decision in a long time that has been difficult because of the things that I've learned, because of how focused I was. There was no YouTube and messing around. There was discipline, adult discipline. There was obsession of perfection and being so right and correct that I could argue the professors on my grade to make sure that it was flawless. That was not the result. That also caused me some problems. What I can tell you though is that those problems made me get a leap into the world. That world and the way that I act now, though I would like to go back to school, is completely different than I was before. Before, I would say I lacked purpose, just like this person that's questioning life, though I never question life. They have a different personality, perhaps, or they have something different where they turn down a different street than me on one thing. What I do know is lacking purpose. Not knowing how to make a decision that works out or how to make a plan that consumes me. And the consuming me part is the whole point of this, because when you're consumed by it, you feel like you have purpose, even if that is not true. Let's have that at minimum for this person. Now, why is the GPA important? Well, it's blinding and it makes you learn about very powerful information. Supply and demand is a class and a topic in economics that requires extreme focus to fully understand. And after you leave class and school, it requires a lot of time and thought. It requires you to want to go to the gym and think about the topic. to master it, to understand the world through it. Realistically, that is not the route that I took. I was learning out of books and achieving perfect scores. That is what I would recommend for the person who thinks that they they are lacking purpose in life. Your purpose, at minimum, in the direction that I would send people in this article, does not sound good to some people. It's that make your life about a number called GPA that the whole world looks at and understands. There might be a conversion for some schools, but almost everybody understands what a 4.33 GPA means in every sort of variable in your life. Give me the age, give me the GPA, give me the location, give me the school, and I could tell you. We can almost all do that. Now, telling that person who's questioning life, I believe that is the advice that we should be giving folks. If you're questioning life, that's what I learned from this article. And it's a big takeaway. That doesn't mean that this article took the wrong direction. It means that I have an experience that I bring to the table that supplements the writing. That's the point of this podcast. So that is quite interesting to think about. But I would like to reverse to the simpler point that I was making at the start of the article is how I see this article different. Now that I've dropped the hammer on the way that I would offer up different advice to somebody who thinks that they lack purpose. And then in turn they question life, though that's not the result of how I would react to that situation. That's never how I reacted. I've always been blinded by opportunity. I'm a very simplistic person that just wants fame and success. That is deep buried in me, and it's something that I've never said simply around people, and it has a noticeable bothering effect on many people that I've engaged with in the past, and it has caused me a lot of problems. But I can tell you that I know that that is a relatively good trait or character to be playing if that is what stopped me from questioning whether I should exist or not. Those are heavy mental problems. Being able to view GPA in that sense, you might have already been somebody who's gone through school if you have mental problems or if you feel symptoms like that, because you're quite intelligent already and you could be exploring very difficult things. I can tell you it's that simple, though. I don't care about the details. That number, 4.33, yeah, you could go to another school, you could move to a different country, or you can achieve that same number somewhere else. A bank account. That one's a tough one. School is always the one that you can influence, though. And there's always a way to get there. There's always a way to get there. If GPA is out of the question, how high is the degree? Enough time put into it, and you're hitting areas where your credential is in demand. That is equivalent to a 4.33. A doctorate or enough time spent studying is equivalent to that. So there's the GPA, or this is a high degree. Nobody's looking at your GPA on a PhD. I actually don't even know if there's a GPA on a PhD. That's how stupid I am. But I can tell you that I'm stupid enough to not question my existence. And that's lucky. And that doesn't mean that I think I have ever thought that I'm a good guy. You know, I have had a hard time in my life dealing with people that question things that are heavy. These are heavy thoughts to be thinking through. Superficial is a problem. Well, looking at GPA like that, I don't think those people have a problem with the superficiality of GPA because there's nothing superficial about it, but it can seem like that sometimes. I'm kind of digging into the weeds now because I'm trying to explore this to see if there's anything else here. Or maybe I say something that helps. The main point, and something that's massively different from what this article said, is the solution to getting past this feeling of feeling like you don't feeling like you're questioning your own existence, or feeling like you have to investigate psychology. Imagine if that person was to go to a psychologist or a professional and say, I feel like I'm tired of existing. Number one, I might just be assuming that they're like thinking of suicide right away. Like in terms of like that the professional is like viewing them through that lens. That might be my own ignorance. I'm not a psychologist. But I could tell you that there's probably I almost don't even want to go down this rabbit hole because I'm not a qualified professional here and I'm just guessing. But if you were to tell me that, that's an area that I'm qualified to talk. I can say how I view that. If you were to tell me that you feel tired of existing, I'm worried that you're going to kill yourself. Unless it's a joke. And it's pretty clear when somebody's completely destroyed versus somebody who's just saying that as a way to joke around and whatever we define that as. Say terrible, and then everybody says terrible things, and then we kind of all do that. But if you say that you're tired of existing, this article makes a great point to connect that to this existential exhaustion, but it also ties it to um, people not knowing their purpose. And that's why this article is brilliant. Now, purpose, like the way I talked about it in this podcast episode, is difficult to get to. It's hard for me to even retrack exactly what I just said and how it developed into that topic of GPA. It's hard to get there. But what I can tell you is that um, there's some sort of blinding that takes effect there. And that's a good thing. If you don't know your purpose, you need to blind yourself. Do you see how that makes sense in the worst and best way? And it doesn't mean I'm condoning it. But some people blind themselves. I don't have to give any examples in case there's any younger listeners. But the best way to blind yourself is by achieving an immaculate GPA. Why? Because it pays and it's seen favorably socially by no matter who you talk about. The market leaders and also those in academia and friends socially, no matter who it is, unless you're a crock who's using a GPA, who's flaunting a view of something that is completely built on a falsehood, you will get the respect. Because you're somebody who worked for that and you're not making big claims that on a piece of paper where that paper does not support that claim. It's as simple as that. You earned it and you get respect for it. And in achieving a GPA, what happens? I mean, we have a path forward to that. We have purpose in the intermediate. And in setting our eyes on that GPA, we have purpose for 4 years. What we learn in those 4 years, anybody who's gone through higher education is honest about it outside of politics to be able to get out of their student loans, a joke, of course, but it's kind of true, is that you are going to come out of that thinking completely different. You might have thought, you might have not realized this because you've always been relatively educated. You've always been educating and up to date with your education. You might not have realized what it means to be behind in your education and then gain one. I have. I can tell you it makes a huge difference. It is the same thing somebody does not notice when they lack education in an area and then you learn about history and you get mad. And it takes time to process that. A lot of people can resonate with that. Okay? It's the same thing. I don't know how that point ties in, but that is an interesting thing that I've learned. An interesting observation. Teaching people about history at times can actually make them not like that thing when they initially had no problem with it. Okay? Like you thinking that you're going to tell me about your past, it doesn't always work out perfectly. It actually makes me say, like, why are you making me aware of this, number one, and is this that important? That's like the start of that conversation. Anyways, this kind of seems off point because I don't really see anything this way because it took a little bit of time to think through that. It's a natural response. I'm allowed to have it. And it's definitely not the point of this. But anyways, because this is raw, that's what I'll say. It's completely honest. When is a dumb person saying that they don't like something? Well, that's a worst case probably. I was not that person. I'm a very loving person. I love everybody to begin with. I've never had a problem with anybody. And I still don't actually. Which is very good. Now, politically, I've seen things that just don't make sense sometimes. But we are very far out into the weeds now. Back to it. Purpose. Yes, the answer is not 1 foot forward in front of the other one, in my view. That is something that is going to send that person back to questioning their life's purpose based on the way that they seem to deal with things. That is what this article defines, and that is the pattern that this person is showing. I can say that because I show the same pattern with something else. I resort to starting something new and then resorting to something that is a high risk opportunity and trying to create something because I can't get away from trying to be as powerful as possible in terms of monetary, social, and all the above. In terms of opportunity, I resort to that. This person resorts to this. That might not be the perfect two examples to offset. But purpose, what I know for sure is think about GPA. Don't think about telling somebody 1 foot in front of the other and takes things slow. Because this article does start to dig into things where it's talking about somebody who's essentially looking at that friend that I mentioned at the start of this podcast, and I'll leave it here after I explain this. That person that you're looking at who has it perfect, they have it perfect and they've never had a problem. They know who to supply. They they know what demand needs them and they know how to supply it. They have the credentials. They feel purpose. They wake up in the morning, they know what to do. Now, why are we mentioning this? We're talking about somebody who doesn't have purpose, We're talking about somebody who is questioning the meaning of life. Okay? It's like that person has it good. And you're looking at it though. You are looking at it and you want to race towards it if you're that person. And that's what this article either touches on or doesn't. You can go and confirm it to go and support this writer. Because I also don't remember if they exactly cited that or if this is an idea that I came up with on this article. Which is also a great way to drive views to the article creators. Something we just learned in doing this podcast. But you're looking at that person who has it perfect. And you're racing towards it. And that racing, something they did mention in the article, I will say, is that life starts moving very fast. And it starts to feel like you don't really have a purpose and a grounding in life. And you start to question things. It ties very well into that point. If you're constantly running around and pointing at people who have it perfect, people who have their purpose, people who are clocking into work, let's say, a work that's always there, a career, it's more than work. Work is a job. Career is a job that you can take on at any company. And you've been building that skill up and it can be employed anywhere. That is purpose. That is a form of supplying a demand. You know what a company needs. Because if somebody was to lose that career by a technological improvement, it would lose purpose. And that's how that proves that that is a very relevant point to this post. Because it directly mentions purpose. But that person is pointing at that person saying, I want to be them. And that's why it says one step in front of the other. I'd say reminding that person of doing that is healthy in the short term, but it constantly makes them go back, in my opinion, just based on how that acted with me. Because I have felt that part. I have not felt the questioning my existence. I've felt not I have felt perfection and racing towards it. I still do that. I'm sprinting in different directions. I see something, I sprint towards it, I start something quick, and that's the example that I give towards for creating new projects and stuff like that. I do that. But this is at least healthier than what? Questioning your existence? Or doing something that doesn't provide something tangible? Or thinking? Or who knows what they do? I don't know what that medium part is. But I can tell you, one step at a time or one day at a time, taking it slow, there's nothing slow about school. And school has a number that you focus on. It blinds you. So what I'm suggesting is that this person needs to be blinded in a healthy way. They need to be blind to everything out there and learn something to where they learn about the information that actually teaches them. I'm somebody who's been told so many pieces of advice in my life, and then just to realize that the only thing that I needed to learn was supply and demand, accounting, some psychology to protect myself in terms of people who are crocs, to just talking about crap, and then a little bit of politics to be able to do the same. That's a pretty honest view of my education. I got that, and I haven't needed much since. And I haven't had a single day where I didn't know a way to move forward. Once you know some accounting, the basic accounting at the start, it's pretty hard to get through it. Because when you're somebody who moves quick and you have any sort of sense of a project or any sort of risk tolerance, it's pretty tough to get through the education quick. That's why I'm not doing it quickly. I'm doing it with time because I don't need it right away. I'm a professional in the kitchen. I don't actually need to be working in a large law firm because I know how to manage my money. And that doesn't mean I did it well. This is just a side piece of information because I've already talked about this article. One step at a time, I learned the tools that I need to wake up in the morning and feel purpose. And it's the information that I learned, not random pieces of information. And it's not take one step at a time. One day at a time, it takes time. It doesn't just take time, it takes a decision. It takes a decision to go to school, but it also takes an education to understand the GPA to be competitive on it. You have to be told by somebody, if anything by me, that GPA matters. You don't have it, it doesn't matter, but I can tell you that by gaining it, it matters. That is life changing. You don't know why, you will not know why. But getting it, I can tell you that that is an asset that you have no way of pricing. Because that number, that paper, I'm not even talking about the friends because I did not go to school for that. I went for the information and the number. So at minimum, I'm able to touch basically anybody. Because if you go to school for friends, you already have it figured out. But yeah, that's my view of this article. I think it's a valid take, valid contribution to this article. Thank you very much for them leading me on to the idea of purpose, and then tying that to how somebody obviously gets off track with that, of questioning their existence and going down a whole psychological thing where I hopefully provided a solution that digs them out of thinking that you have to get that deep into things and analytical. That's just gonna give them more to analyze. Is that not? How about leading to a simple solution that makes them a normal person? If anything, I'm leading them towards education. A life that is completely normal by every standard, instead of having them a abnormal psychology patient. That's all I'm trying to do. One step at a time, that's a good comforting step. There's nothing wrong with that. It's actually a mix of the two that would probably be better. The author would probably say the same. One step at a time, but I could tell you the hard piece of information is the one that I mentioned. So thank you very much for listening to the Thought About It podcast. This is episode number 2. And this is what you can expect. Sometimes I might ramble less, sometimes I might ramble more. I could tell you that I did actually stay on point of the article quite well. So I'm not gonna change things up unless I just completely disconnect from the article to where I can't rejoin the article within 5 minutes. I didn't even get close to that. But I know it's not attention spans, but it's the tangents go quite wide. Uh, in terms of like not making sense, but then it wraps back. Um, and then it's for me to think a little bit. So there's a little bit of time there of sharing things that even if it doesn't wrap back perfectly, then it's at least me talking and sharing things about myself that might help. So yeah, thanks for listening if you're listening, and subscribers mean more than you think. So if you could do that, that would be fantastic. Um, but yeah, thank you very much. Just posted, by the way, a episode number 6 on Point Five podcast. I just spoke to Suzanne. Um, my last 2 guests were actually named Suzanne. And yeah, just go there, point5podcast.com. That's the word point 5 podcast.com. Really just search that up and you'll find it. Last episode number 6 just dropped today, right before this. So, and then I just did some reading, and then I'm just recording this, and then I post this tonight. So, hope you guys enjoyed the content today, and have a good night. Hopefully, I made this very heavy article very easy to consume and gave you some hope that when you reach a very heavy article like this, that there's actually a very simple answer to some of this stuff, and it does not have to be so heavy, or it doesn't have to seem so helpless. Because I can tell you, one day at a time makes the average reader not think that that's something that's a little bit depressing, but it kind of gives that feeling when you leave off the article. The thing that I'm talking about, a little bit more constructive, little harder to write towards, because it's a very specific solution that might not take as well on a platform like Medium. But I can tell you that there's a point in what I'm saying, and that thing might be better derived, but it might make for harder reading. So, anyways, that's it for me, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day, night, whatever.